Don't be afraid, it really is me, Zach Gallardo, self-proclaimed Fixie expert. I just want to make it abundantly clear that Tyrant Bikes has not kidnapped me, forced me to shave my head, and say nice things about their bikes. I have done this to myself, entirely of my own volition. Basically, I was just getting sick of having long hair. It got really hot. I had dandruff a lot of times, and I was sick of it getting in my eyes and mouth. And I have to tell you, it's really nice having my peripheral vision back. And just like I voluntarily shaved my head, everything I'm going to say in this review of the Tyrant Legacy is entirely my own opinion. It's entirely my own choice. And Tyrant has no say in what I say about their bikes, good or bad. And if you're not convinced that it really is me, see? Oh look, Zach is back. Although Tyrant may be a new name, the people behind Tyrant are no strangers to the fixed gear scene. The president of the company and the guy who designs the Tyrants is Sal Lombroso, the founder of Leader Bike USA. They're also supported by other familiar names like Patrick Thames from Pedal Consumption, which I read Pedal Consumption pretty much every single day when I first started riding fixed gear back in 2012. He's also the designer of the Kagero, fantastic fixed gear in its own right, and supported by Emmy Brown, who is an original member of MASH SF, former San Francisco bike courier, and the name Tyrant actually comes from Emmy Brown. The word on the street is, and by the street I mean what Tyrant has told me directly, is that when Emmy was a bike messenger back in SF, his mindset is that he had to get the package delivered safely, securely, and quickly. And in order to do that, he had to be a boss on the streets and be a tyrant on the streets. Because when you're on a bicycle, you have to own your space and make people respect you. And because of his in-your-face riding style, his courier company nicknamed him the Tyrant. So although Tyrant may be a new name and they've only been selling fixed gear since 2020, the people behind Tyrant know exactly what they're doing when it comes to making and riding fixed gear bikes. Now, I've been riding the Tyrant Legacy exclusively as my only bike for the past couple of months. I have some opinions on it. I've even done a century ride on it, and spoiler alert, it was the easiest century ride that I've ever done, partially thanks to the bike. Although the Tyrant Legacy isn't exactly on the top of people's minds when it comes to steel fixed gears, and it's a relatively new bike, I have to say that the Tyrant Legacy is definitely a sleeper, underrated steel fixed gear that you should definitely keep your eye on. Speaking of bikes that you should keep your eye on, a portion of this video is sponsored by Wabi Cycles. Wabi makes some of the tastiest steel fixed gears that I've ever thrown a leg over, and they're so good that it's the only bike that I care to own. Be sure to stick around to the end of the video to learn about what makes Wabi Cycles so dope. Just looking at the Tyrant Legacy, it's apparent that it is a modern steel fixed gear bike through and through. It's made out of 4130 double-body chromoly. It has oversized tubing for extra stiffness, a segmented fork reminiscent of old school mountain bikes, and custom dropouts that harken back to 70s BMX bikes. Along with that, it has some nice touches like the side tack seat stays with the Tyrant branding on it, and a seat tube cutout so you could tuck the rear wheel in to the frame to squeeze the wheelbase and theoretically get a more responsive ride quality. Overall, it's a really nice looking bike. It's got a lot of personality, and when you look at the details, you can tell a lot of attention and care and love went into designing this bike. And at the current price of $600, not on sale, currently on sale for $550, I would certainly hope that it feels like you're getting something special when you're dropping that much money for a mid-range fixed gear. But if you're a weight weenie, you should definitely be wary of this bike. Not a lot of consideration went into making this bike as light as possible. The oversized tubing is going to be heavier, the segmented fork is going to be heavier, and I'm no rocket surgeon, but the dropouts also look pretty beefy on this thing, and it's not using the lightest tube set in the world. A very respectable tube set, but not the lightest. So the frame set weighs in. I have a 58 centimeter here. This is the extra large. It's 8 pounds and 3 ounces. And if you don't know what that means, when I have it fully built up as I do, again, not a weight weenie build by any means, I have some heavy components on here, Brooks saddle tubeless, also has a 31.6 seat post, weighs in at 22 pounds 9 ounces. It's a lot of bike. And while I don't really think that you should be concerned about the weight because it still rides super nicely, it is something to consider if you're especially looking for a sub 20 pound bike so you can have bragging rights on your group rides. The Legacy also has some nice touches like double bottle bosses on the C-tube and the down tube to make it very well equipped for longer rides, and doubly so with the bosses for a rear rack if you ever want to do some loaded touring on this thing. The Legacy regrettably does come with a couple of quirks though for how unique it is. The most unique feature of the bike is the C-tube cutout. This is really like difficult to get steel to do this and to have it be structurally sound. Steel's not a very malleable material, but they were able to get this C-tube cutout so you could theoretically jam the rear wheel into the cutout. But I say theoretically because depending on your setup, it might not work. Your gear ratio, your ideal chain tension, your tire size, all these factors play into whether you can get your rear wheel slammed into a cutout. And for mine, it didn't work. And that's especially considering that the dimples and the chainstays just seem to be in the wrong spots. And when you try to slam your tire into the cutout, it's dimples for the rim rather than a tire, and there's just not enough clearance because the dimples seem to be in the wrong spots. Another thing that I found a bit quirky on my unit, this is not a problem with all of them by any means, is that my seat tube bottle bosses are about 6 millimeters out of spec. That is something I would expect them to warranty, and because the Legacy does have some pretty aggressive geometry, it has toe overlap. I'm riding the 58 centimeter XL, usually the higher up in size that you go, the less chance and the less toe overlap you have. Still has toe overlap, it doesn't bother me, but some people it super bothers, so do keep that in mind. Another thing I'm not a super huge fan of is that they went with a 31.6 millimeter seat post. 31.6 seat posts don't have any difference in ride quality that I've noticed. It does look different, which that may be a plus for some people, but you have to sacrifice a lot of options for seat posts just to get 31.6. The problem that I ran into is because I run Brooks saddles, there aren't a lot of options for 31.6 seat posts that have a lot of setback, enough for a Brooks saddle, say 25 millimeters or more, because most of them are a modern standard. Modern in the sense that it's newer, not better. Don't confuse that. And because there just aren't as many bikes with 31.6 seat posts, your options are going to be limited for your dimensions, for color, for whether you want a black one or a silver one, and whether you want to get one off of the used market. It just seems a little bit limiting. But the tire clearance is something I can't knock it for. It can fit 35C tires in the front and rear, 32C with knobbies. So if you want to take this thing off-road, it can definitely handle it. I would have wished that it was just a little bigger tire clearance. For me, if you're making a bike that can fit 35s, why not make it 38s? Why not make it 42s or 45s? There are other options out on the market that can fit bigger tires. 35 though, it's just enough to do some off-road stuff, and it's plenty enough if you're riding around the streets and just want to tank potholes. The ride quality is definitely different from any other steel bike that I've ridden. Because the tubing is so oversized and large diameter, it gives the steel bike a much stiffer and responsive ride quality compared to standard diameter tubing. Normally steel, it has a bit of give to it, it's a little bit springy, it's more supple, but this takes it into the other direction where it makes it stiffer and more responsive and gives you a more immediate feedback when you press down on the pedals. I describe it as a middle ground between a steel bike and an aluminum bike, where it has somewhat the best of both worlds, where it's still comfortable like a steel bike, it still feels like it absorbs bumps in the road really well and chatter, but it's still a rigid and stiff frame set. I wouldn't call it fast, but it feels more like an SUV that's really comfy and gives you good visibility and lets you just cruise on down the road. You do have to coax it up from stops a little bit, but that weight feels like it's useful weight. It's wearing it well, and it makes the bike just feel really confidence-inspiring to ride. Like, it can take anything that you throw on it, on-road or off-road. I tank potholes with this thing. I've taken it off-road on some single track. And to me, the frame set feels solid, and the limiting factor is actually the tire size for how gnarly of off-roading you want to do. Cannot do baby heads, can confirm. Deep gravel, it's a little squirrely, but doable. Light gravel, it excels at perfectly. Hard-packed dirt, maybe even some mud if you have some knobbies on it. Good to go. Another thing about the Legacy's stiffness and responsiveness, this is the easiest frame set to skid that I've ever ridden. I am just pulling out whip skids left and right. It is the most confident brakeless fixed gear that I've ever ridden. I would have no qualms descending a mountain with the Tyrant Legacy. It just feels like whatever direction you point it in, it just goes. Because the geometry has some pretty steep angles with a 75-degree head tube and 75-degree C-tube and a 28mm fork rake. It just feels like a really nice balance between stability and responsiveness. And that stiffness gives you a lot of control over the rear end to skid as you please. On most other steel bikes, because they're springier, it can feel like the bike, when you're trying to backpedal into a skid, is trying to kick you back into pedaling forward. Not really the case on the Legacy with its stiffness. It just feels like it can switch between forward pedaling and back pedaling on a dime, and it's really nice when you're descending. I did not know that I could do seated descending whip skids so well until I rode this bike. It feels like a very confident and planted bike. This is the best cornering frame set that I have ever ridden. At no point did corners, even super tight ones, feel sketchy to me, and I felt like I could ride a lot more aggressive on the Legacy versus other bikes I've ridden. So who's this bike for? Well, if I'm being honest, I could pretty happily daily ride the Legacy, but I was talking to Sal on the phone, and he's even aware of this, and he said, at the end of the day, people are going to ride whatever bike they find themselves most attracted to. And so the question that you need to ask yourself is, are you attracted to this bike? I could happily daily it, but I won't, just because I'm not really attracted to modern steel fixed gears. I'm more so like the classic steel stuff. But if you're somebody that likes the modern look of aluminum bikes, but you just cannot stand how stiff and chattery and how fragile aluminum bikes ride, definitely check out the Legacy. It feels like a tank when you're riding this bike. When I'm riding the Legacy, I feel like I can do any type of riding that I want. I don't have to question the bike. All I have to do is question my abilities. At $600 at full price, I would say that is a fair price for how sick this bike is and for how well it rides. And if you can get it on sale, like it is right now, like it probably will be until Black Friday, I would imagine. Tyrant, leave a comment below for how long you're doing the sale. Definitely check it out. The thing is, though, at $500 to like $700 price range, you have a lot of options for steel fixed gears. The ones that immediately come to my mind are the Soma Rush, which is $600 full price, and they've been doing sales a lot on it lately. The thing with the Rush is that it's true track geometry. It, in my opinion, is more my style, so I would rather ride that. But it can only fit 32C tires rather than 35, so you are making a bit of a trade-off there. Then there's the All City Big Block, which is also $600 now, which is insane to me. But All City is being discontinued after 2024, so get your hands on these while you can if you're into it. It's also a modern steel fixed gear. Also fits 32C tires, so very much in the same realm. But has smaller diameter tubing, so it's a little springier. And then the ones that I would look at if I was looking to build a more like tourer kind of bike, or even a meaner off-road kind of bike, are the Surly Steamroller at $600. It's a pretty basic 4130 chromoly frame set, but it can fit 38C tires, which is killer. And then my personal favorite, especially if you want to load it up with fenders, racks, panniers, the whole works, is the Wabi Thunder. Like, also, the thing with the Wabi Thunder, it can fit up to 45C tires, which is way bigger. It's a little bit of a different beast. The geometry is a little bit more relaxed. It has canty studs for running brakes. It's also made out of more lighter weight, springier, suppler Reynolds 725 tubing rather than 4130. So it's going to be a lot lighter and easier to get up hills and easier to ride for longer distances. Not that the Legacy can't do that, because I did a century on it and it was the easiest century of my life. And the Wabi Thunder comes clocking in at just $625. So you do have a lot of options here, but if you want like the ultimate modern street fixed gear, you don't need to go over 35C tires. This is an excellent choice. I would be way more willing to daily this bike if it just came in painted colors. Currently, the only two colors are the one that I have here, which is raw with gold decals and a gloss clear coat, or you could go raw with silver decals and a matte clear coat. And I just do not like the look of raw steel bikes. It's something in my eyes that's a bit overplayed. It's something that's been popularized by MASH. They've kind of just made it their thing. And if you're doing that, people are just going to compare your bike to that bike, and it doesn't feel as unique. Even though there are a lot of nice touches to this bike, it just makes the overall vibe of the bike put into that category and nothing else. Even if Tyrant just made a black one with gold decals or silver decals, I think that would look way cooler than just raw steel. And it's a very particular bike. You have to ask yourself whether you find yourself attracted to it or not, because at the end of the day, you and I, we're going to ride whatever bike we find most attractive to us. Make a purple one with gold decals, Tyrant, and then we'll talk. But the bikes that I do find myself most attracted to are brought to you by this portion of the video's sponsor, Wabi Cycles. The reason anybody even rides bikes in the first place is because they're fun. And I've ridden a lot of bikes, and Wabis are the most fun I've had riding a bike. The thing that makes them so darn fun to ride is that they're constructed out of lightweight, lively, springy Reynolds 725 or Columbus Spirit tubing. That's the fancy stuff that's made in the UK for the Reynolds steel, like on my Wabi Special, or made in Italy, like on their top-end Wabi Lightning. On top of that, they're meticulously handmade with love and care and a disgusting amount of attention to detail by master craftsmen in Taiwan. And whether you just want to buy the standalone frame set or build up your own Wabi, you can choose everything down from the fine details so that you can really dial in your bike and have a perfectly fitted and perfectly riding bikes right out of the box. The bottom line is, anytime I choose to ride my Wabi, it is one of the best decisions that I make in that day. Be sure to check out Wabi Cycles, linked in the description. Fixie famous shoutouts to Julian Corona, Brandon Black, Brent David, Perez, and Onchi for helping to make these Fixie videos possible through their support on Patreon. And remember that life is short, but don't make it shorter, so be sure to ride your bike every day to be reasonably dangerous.